That's right.
Welcome to The Know. I'm Brian.
I'm Jen.
So the big news of the day, let's get right to it. Sony says it is skipping E3 for the first time in the 24-year history of E3. And we're going to look at why they're doing this and kind of explore, everybody has their theories and, whatnot in terms of why they decided to do this now. But let's get to the actual news and what Sony said first. And then we'll kind of go over, each of our theories as to why they're doing this.
Sounds good. I like it.
Yeah. So Sony put out a statement that said, as the industry evolves, Sony Interactive Entertainment continues to look for inventive opportunities to engage the community. PlayStation fans mean the world to us, and we always want to innovate, think differently, and experiment with new ways to delight gamers. Boy, that's some corporate speak. As a result, we have decided not to participate in E3 in 2019. We are exploring new and familiar ways to engage our community in 2019 and can't wait to share our plans with you. So, Jen, what was your first reaction to this?
This was corporate buzzword Mad Libs.
Yes.
That's exactly what this was.
Delight, innovate.
Engage community.
Yes, big time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, I'm surprised by it in that Sony is such a juggernaut that it's just kind of one of the pillars of E3.
Sure.
But I'm not surprised by it because I'm one of those people, I'm in that camp that I've kind of seen, I feel like E3 is not dying, but has changed and evolved so much that having a presence there is not as important as it once was.
Well, it might be dying after this.
Yeah, no kidding. But E3 at this point, like most of what people consider E3 happens before E3 is really going. Everyone's doing conferences and stuff before the event itself actually starts.
Meaning like sort of in the days leading up?
Yeah. So it's like E3 has now bled outside of its official days and, and everyone's doing things like 2 and 3 days ahead of when the show floor opens. So when you're already doing kind of your own thing and just saying, I have to do it around this weekend, why? Why do you have to do it around that weekend? Nintendo has been really successful doing their kind of, we're going to do 4 smaller ones like every quarter, give everybody what they need, just like this is what's coming up immediately, be excited for this, and that way they can also keep some things closer to the chest. And I think I'm not going to be surprised if now that Sony, if they're going to start moving that kind of direction and if Microsoft will eventually follow suit because you get a better engagement with your community.
Yeah, in a way, E3 is very old-fashioned in terms of a concept because, back sort of pre-internet or very early internet, I think a big event like this was needed for the games makers to have a place or event where all eyes are on it.
Absolutely.
And then to, drum up support for their games, their new consoles, all that. I mean, 24 years. So... But these days, they all have their own, social media channels with millions and millions of followers. So, as Nintendo, like you said, has shown you can do your own thing whenever you want. So, in a way, to me, it seems kind of surprising that E3 is still around.
Absolutely,
and it's lasted this
definitely.
long.
It used to be very necessary, but like you said, we're now with the age of the internet that we are in, where everyone can stream whatever on their own platforms and on other and share things immediately. And you have betas that you can send to people, and you have your dashboards on all your consoles that say these things are coming up. You don't need that in-person connection that you once did.
Right. They can go, hey, we're going to have a big announcement tomorrow. We're going to live stream it. Enough people are going to watch that.
Exactly.
Without having to spend all the money for an E3 presence, because it's not just having the big sort of stage show announcement that some of them do. They also have giant presences there, like booths. And even, I remember Nintendo at a couple of E3s back, it looked like an amusement park that they had built. And I couldn't imagine like the amount of money they had put into this. And maybe somebody at Sony was just like, why are we spending, untold millions of dollars when we can just do our own
for what
thing?
gain at that point? It's especially because I feel like E3 last year, nobody really had anything that was unexpected. I say nobody. Someone's gonna skewer me for saying that. There were not a lot of surprises across like anybody's.
I think that's right.
Press
I don't remember thinking, whoa.
Yeah, there were a couple little
Yeah.
bombs, but everything had been leaked enough or had been theorized enough that if it showed up, you're like, okay, cool, this is exactly what we thought we were going to see. And maybe it looks different than you expected, but you expected to see certain things and certain titles from certain groups.
And I certainly remember back in the earlier days of E3, especially in the 90s, that's where most, if not all, of the big announcements were made. That's when people rolled out new hardware, all that, because they knew everybody would be watching. And I think that's what E3 had to offer. It's like, well, the eyes of the gaming world are kind of on us in these few days. So what do you think Sony's motivation is? Do you think there's a lot of speculation that they would like the stage to themselves when it comes to the PlayStation 5 or whatever the next PlayStation is? Do you think that factored in?
I think that might be a factor. I don't know if there was any one necessarily like deciding factor in it, but I do think somebody just kind of went, why are we spending all this money to do this thing, especially when they might not have a super full slate of games, or at least games they think are worth the E3 attention that are coming. If they're still working on doing a PS5, and that's not going to be ready either. We've gotten to a point where people are announcing things super, super early, and that starts to kind of bite you in the butt. And maybe it was kind of that recognition too of anything we show is going to be too early of a stage, that people are going to hold us to these things that we said that might still be concept and not actually being the real thing, and trying to mitigate
the Square
that.
Enix method of doing things.
Oh my gosh.
Here's what we're working on, and it might be out in 10 years.
Yeah, it's like maybe we'll see it again. I don't know.
Yeah, you'll have grandchildren by the time this is out. So I think the PS5. I think there's some credence to that. That yes, that could be. Other people have suggested maybe they don't really have anything to show, which I find kind of hard to believe given that it's Sony. But people have pointed to a comment, Shawn Layden, who's chairman of Sony Interactive Entertainment Worldwide Studios. He made a comment as to they're not going to have a PlayStation experience this year. And he kind of mentioned a lack of games. He said, now that we have Spider-Man out the door, we're looking down in 2019 to games like Dreams and Days Gone. But we wouldn't have enough to bring people all together in some location in North America to have that event. We don't want to set expectations really high and then not deliver on it. So maybe they didn't have enough of soon-to-be-released games that they could show off.
Yeah, this could be something like that. It could just be maybe they took our advice from whatever it was a couple weeks ago, where instead of just trying to pump out quantity, they're actually spending the time on quality and won't necessarily. If everyone's gotten used to it, we're going to see this much stuff at this event. And it's like, cool, we've actually scaled that back so we can spend more time to put more polish into these things and really develop these things, to develop these engines, develop these new storytelling methods. Then why give that away too early, and then also just have people be disappointed that they got this many things instead of this many things, even if the smaller amount was better.
They seem to kind of go smaller at the last E3. They only showed off a few games. It was Death Stranding, Last of Us 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man, Days Gone. But they also got knocked. I think, a lot of people didn't like Sony's presentation.
Yeah, and that criticism from their E3 presentation last year might have also fed into this. It's like, okay, cool.
You know what? Fuck off.
Yeah, it's like, all right, this is what you wanted. We're not going to do it.
And I think there's also maybe a factor of Sony has won this console generation. The PlayStation 4 has sold, I think the last count was more than 86 million. It's probably going to crack 100, so that's putting you into Wii and PlayStation 2 and PlayStation, all-time great territory. And we have seen this in the past with Sony, with other people, when a developer or a console maker is on top, they tend to start to dictate things. Well, we're going to do this our way. We don't have to, we're not going to be at E3 because we don't have to. And that might be part of it. You know what? We don't have to do this.
Exactly. If it's been the status quo for you've been there for 24 years, at what point, if we're going to say that, cool, by numbers you have won this generation, you have nothing left to prove. Why do it? Why do that?
Or do they want to go radio silent a little bit until kind of lay low until they're ready for something big, for their big, next console announcement, the PS5? What do you think this is going to mean going forward for E3? Because that's a huge loss for the number one console to just peace out next year. And Nintendo hasn't had a presentation in years. They've kind of led the trail on this. They'll put out a direct, but they're not giving a live presentation. Xbox tweeted, "We can't wait to see you at E3." They're like, "Oh, we're definitely going to be there." But what do you think this is a bad sign for E3?
I don't know if it's a bad sign. I don't think it's a good sign.
Yeah.
I think this will be a really great barometer for everyone else who does presentations and has a presence at E3 to see what happens to Sony in the time leading up to E3 and then coming right after and be like, if they're able to maintain kind of their pace,
Their dominance.
and their dominance, and say, okay, well, if they didn't have to be there to at least retain their position, why are we all spending this money to do this thing too? And I don't know if it's going to spell the end of E3, but I do see that E3 has kind of gone through these cycles of expanding and kind of and then coming back in on itself and then expanding again. And I think we reached that peak expansion, and this is the start of it trying to reform itself into a more defined area.
Yeah, more corporate speak, maybe right size it a little bit as opposed to this giant, massive thing with all these people. I think if Sony pays a price for missing E3, but I can't picture this in my mind, but if somehow they sort of start to taper off, maybe that, or if Microsoft gets some huge bump for, in sales or something because they were at E3, but I think it would be hard to track that.
I think so too.
People aren't going to forget the PlayStation exists.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like, why do we see advertisements for Coke and Pepsi? You don't need that. Everybody knows what those things are.
Right.
But there's a reason they still do those advertisements.
Yeah.
And so this kind of might follow that sort of trend too. It's like, if you aren't just shoving it in people's faces, if you have your own first party games that are coming down the line, you do have your direct line to all of your base already. It does make your expansion harder because maybe somebody who's hardcore into just Nintendo or whatnot is not going to necessarily see all these other things that you are offering just on your console if you're not shoving it down their throats.
Kotaku put it in a little bit of perspective, noting that multiple publishers have dropped out over the last couple of years. EA, you were talking about, they hold their own thing in the days leading up to it. Microsoft last year rented out a theater that was close to the convention, convention center, but not, it wasn't there. Nintendo obviously has, does their directs. They don't do like the traditional live thing. And E3 is sort of a weird. TechCrunch had a good quote about E3. Their writer said they like E3, but it's also monumentally dumb. Game companies spending millions to show off essentially faked content to an increasingly jaded audience, and it's increasingly out of step with how the gaming industry works. That's been a huge controversy with E3 of people show off these beautiful demos, and it turns out it wasn't actually rendered with the engine, it was pre-rendered stuff, and then the game comes out and people are like,
this
doesn't look like it did at E3. That has happened for many, many games, and it's always this big spectacle every year, but maybe gamers are just sort of tired of it, or like, I don't know if I believe what I'm watching here.
I think the spectacle that E3 has become does a great disservice to a lot of really great games and everyone ends up with these expectations that are up here for it that might be unrealistic for what it's going to end up being. And so I think you kind of shoot yourself in the foot that you could have this great game, but if somebody was expecting this, and it doesn't hit that, it's like, okay, well now it's not good anymore. And it could still be fantastic. If you were expecting down here and then they over-deliver, it's like, heck yes, okay, cool.
But you're sort of begging to be in one of those E3 broken promises video, and then it's like you start off like, people are mad at you.
Yeah, I think taking a break, taking a break year, at least allows them the opportunity to kind of refocus how it is they want to communicate their big news to consumers.
I think they're going to obviously do some sort of announcement. Maybe it'll be around E3, maybe it'll be on their own time. But they're definitely going to test something out next year and see if it works. If it does work, they might be like, great, we're never coming back. If it doesn't, I can see them be like, we'll come back.
Take me back, baby.
Let's get back together, E3. Yeah.
Let's try it again. It was me.
So that is the big news about Sony skipping E3. Why do you guys think that they're doing it? We would love to hear from you guys in the comments. Do you think this spells the end for E3, or will it continue on, maybe shrink in the future? Let us know, and that's it from us, and we'll see you later.
Bye.